I previously posted a review of a Supreme Court case Randolph, where the court had to decide whether the police can search a home without a warrant if one resident consents to the search while the other one unequivocally opposes. Now, the court briefly mentioned a situation where one of the residents could potentially be a victim of crime of violence. And this week, we'll focus on just that, an exception to the Fourth Amendment requirement of a warrant called exigent circumstances. In this video, we'll be discussing a Supreme Court case, Ryburn versus Huff. And any time we're dealing with exigent circumstances, the facts become very important. So here's what happened. The police received a call from a principal of a high school. The principal told the police that there was a rumor going around that a student named Vincent Huff was going to shoot up the school. The officers decided to go to the high school and investigate further. They interviewed a couple students and the principal himself. They found out that Vincent was bullied by other students, and he even wrote a letter saying that he was going to shoot up the school. Because of those threats, a number of parents did not send their kids to high school that day. So the police, with that information in hand, decided to drive to Vincent's home. They knocked on the front door, but nobody answered. They waited some more, and then they decided to call Mrs. Huff on a home phone number. They could hear the phone ringing inside the home, but nobody answered it. Several minutes later, they called Mrs. Huff directly on her cell phone. She answered. The police told her that they would like to speak to her and her location. She said that she was inside the house. So they asked her if she could come out and speak to them. Before they could finish the sentence, Mrs. Huff hung up on the police. After several minutes of waiting, Mrs. Huff, along with her son Vincent, finally emerged from the home. They began talking to the police, and one of the officers found it strange that Mrs. Huff never asked him the reason they were there or the topics the police wanted to discuss. After some time during the conversation, the officer asked Mrs. Huff if there were any firearms inside the home. Instead of answering, Mrs. Huff turned around and began running into the home. In a split-second decision, the officer decided to run after her. He was worried for his own safety and the safety of other officers. So it was Mrs. Huff that entered the front door first, then a police officer, then Vincent, then another police officer. Once inside, the police never searched the residence or any of the residents inside. Now, Mrs. Huff and her family sues the police department for violating the Fourth Amendment and entering their home without a warrant. So the question to the Supreme Court is whether the police can enter a home under these circumstances without a warrant. Before we can answer that question, something to keep in mind. By the time we're before the Supreme Court, the parties are no longer arguing the facts of the case. We have to make a presumption that the lower court did their job. They found out what actually happened. They took testimony of the officers, of the family, of other witnesses, and here's what we know. The police had information from the high school. When they first arrived to Mrs. Huff's home, there was an odd behavior by the parents. They didn't answer the door. They were hanging up on the police when they were trying to talk on the phone. And finally, maybe the most important factor, that when the police asked Mrs. Huff about the weapons, she ran back into the home. And the police officers had to make a split-second decision because the situation was rapidly evolving. And under these circumstances, the Supreme Court tells us that the officers could search the home, or at least enter it, without a warrant. And by the way, the entry itself is a search under the Fourth Amendment. Now, I know that cases with exigent circumstances exception to the warrant requirement are tough because they're so factual and they don't provide us with a bright line rule. So here's the best thing that the Supreme Court can tell us. If the officers can articulate a reasonable belief that there is going to be imminent danger or violence, they can enter the home without a warrant. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please click like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button so next time I post, you'll be first to know.